trifecta, right? So I have dyslexia, and I have learning disabilities and comprehension and retention, right? It's the trifecta. So those three things have really kind of had an impact on how I make work. It has an impact on my creative process. It has an impact on how I gather source material. It has an impact on how I arrange and compose structure within the work. It also led to why I'm a printmaker. If you don't know printmakers, some of you do, some of you probably don't, we tend to be very anal people. We tend to keep things in groups. We tend to like to collect things in groups. And for me, with dyslexia and learning disabilities, retention and comprehension, it's sort of therapeutic in a way. It's also sort of a safety arena for me, because it's a kind of process that requires you to function within these rules, right? So I started making prints when I was very young. I grew up in Chicago. I don't know how many, if the other artists did a lot of bio, but I'm going to try to keep it very short, but it's context. I grew up outside Chicago, and I went to an art high school, and I started making lithographs when I was a freshman in high school. Right? So I can't remember how old you are then, maybe 14 or so. And my teachers there were printmakers. One was a friend of Harry Hu, and showed with him in Chicago. And he was a hardcore printmaker, and that's what I did. I didn't really know any better, right? So I wanted to be a ski patrol when I finished high school. It seemed like the thing to do. But I ended up in art school. And I ended up being a printmaker, and ended up coming to Louisiana in 1992. Now, I've been here half my life. Most people would say, well, you're an adopted Louisianian, right? I also married someone from Houma, so you would think that would take care of that problem, right? If I wasn't. But, to make things a little bit worse, I'm also allergic to fish. And I hate to dance. I hate Cajun music, even though I live in Lafayette. You didn't hear me say it. I don't like it. So, and I also have a little sprinkling of social anxiety, right? So, I've never really been able to assimilate into Louisiana, right? Like most of you have, if you're born here, or if you're a transplant, you do, because you probably eat the fish and you probably like the music. So, for me, although I've been here half my life, I really still deal with this difficulty between place. It's a constant in my work. It's a constant in my sort of everyday functioning. Right? Now, the work primarily now is lithographs. But I work in all the print processes because I teach them all. And my teaching is a direct connection to my practice. They're not disconnected. What I do in the studio is connected to the classroom. And I feed off of that process, and I bring it into the studio. So because I teach printmaking over in Lafayette, I teach all the processes, I do all the processes. But one of the things that I discovered probably 6 years ago was I became very interested in the relationship of dialogue, not only between myself and colleagues, myself and faculty, myself and administrators, right? But really a dialogue between the work that I was doing in these different print processes. One of the beautiful things about printmaking is it's a hub for everything. It really is. If you're a painter, there's a way to work in the process. If you're a sculptor, there's a way to work in the process. If you're a draftsman, there's a way to work in the process. The other beautiful thing about the printmaking process is every process within the print medium has a different look and feel. Woodcuts feel a certain way, lithos feel a certain way, silkscreens feel a certain way, etchings feel a certain way. The ability to bring those worlds together at one time was very difficult in the print process. It involved a lot of chemicals, it involved a lot of registration issues. It was difficult. People didn't really do it. When computers came around, it opened up different ways to bring those different voices together. Right? It's a different type of migration. Right? So I've talked about migrations in different ways. The migration within the print process, how this process can move from here to here and then from here to here, also for me is a migration. So the ways of moving from one world to another world to another world to me is very, very important. So the ability to make a space, a composition that seems timeless, that seems surreal, that seems to move from one world to another world to another world in both process as well as image becomes very important to me. What I do in the work is I try to bring a lot of different worlds that I'm working in at one time and fuse them into a new time and place. So how do I do that? The work starts from the act or the idea of making a finished print. Right? That makes sense. So I sit down in front of a lithostone and I start drawing. I sit in front of a wood block and I start drawing and cutting, or a silkscreen. And I'll spend weeks, months, working on a print. And then I'll print it. Won't edition it, I'll print it. And I'll have all this stuff in my studio, which most people would look at and say, well, that's kind of nice. But I usually don't like it. And I'll take all that work and I'll start scanning it into the computer. So I bring all these worlds into sort of a room within the computer. And then what I do is I bring these documentations of paths. I talked about those earlier. And I bring them in as well. And I start layering these worlds that I've brought in and start fusing them together. And what drives the composition and the structural formalism within the work are these documentations of paths. Verticals, horizontals. Right? So if you look at the work, you see a lot of what you would consider maybe windows. You see things that are potentially landscape. You see things that are potentially birds or skulls. I like to take things that are recognizable, and I like to remove identity from them so they don't become necessarily recognizable, right? Where you have, the viewer has to look at them and think about them, consider them. Could be this, it could be that. Sometimes I leave enough information to give you enough information to draw a conclusion on a specific part.
Why do you have so many skulls in your pictures?
It's a good question. You know, I like skulls. I think as a printmaker, you sort of get inflicted with certain stereotypical things, which you get stuck with certain iconography too. It's probably the same with painters, I don't know. Maybe the same with sculptors and ceramicists. The skulls started when my brother-in-law was sending me the pig heads. That's where it started. So, you know, he would send these heads via UPS, and sometimes the United States Postal Service, you know. They would show up at the art office over at LSU. I'd get a phone call in the print shop. The secretary would say, Brian, you got a box. They never do it. I'd go over, pick up a box. And I remember the first one. And you know, he did, I don't know if any of you know, had farmers in the family, but farmers they're practical jokers, right? But they don't tell you that they're joking. I mean, they're pretty serious folks. So I picked up the first box and I brought it back to Foster. And I opened it up and there was this bag, plastic bag. I opened that up and there was a pig head looking right up at me, right? There was still flesh on it. And so I pulled it out and I'm not a hunter, never hunted, I don't fish. So I went across to that science lab, basement of Foster, and said, I got this thing, what do I do? And they told me what to do. So I went to the acid room of the print shop and I defleshed what I could and got some buckets and bleached it. Right? But I became really enamored with the skull of that animal. I don't know if you've ever seen a pig skull. It's incredible, absolutely incredible. I would never have imagined, you know, Charlotte's head on that skull. I mean, it was just amazing what it looked like. And then I would, he'd send them, like one every 2 months or so, and I had a collection of these things. And I really started kind of being enamored with just the beauty of them. Not as a symbol of death, but just a symbol of life. And then I started to really become interested with things that lie beneath the surface of things. And I started to connect with things that did that, like an alligator, for example, right? An alligator only comes up when it needs to, and it comes up. And it's amazing how that creature can come up and then just disappear. And then the water is just still. Right? You ever see Jaws? Remember that movie? Mm-hmm. Right? I'll go back to when I was in, the movie came out in '75. I think I was in first grade. When I was in first grade, that's when they realized there was something wrong, right? I was falling behind. I wasn't spelling right. I had to go to see the shrink. And back then, you were either behavior disordered, BD, or LD, learning disabled, right? You were either slow or you wanted to burn the school down, right? There was no ADHD, ADD. There wasn't these other sort of, categories, right? This or that. You were talking about black and white, right? It was this or that. And the Saturday, I had to go see him on Monday. The Saturday before Monday, my father thought it'd be great to take the whole family to go see the movie, right? Go see Jaws. That movie had an impact on me. It still does. I will not go in the ocean. I will not. I will not swim in a lake. Right? I mean, it had an absolute terrifying effect that I still feel today. And it's for obvious reasons, right? The shark, the head coming out of the boat, right? The guy getting chopped at the end. I mean, sure. But it had to do with the unknown, right? What's beneath the surface, I think, is what was more terrifying for me, right? Seeing what could be there, but not knowing what really, if it was there or not being able to see that. And that can be a metaphor for a lot of things, right? But for me, the skulls were really amazing. That was underneath that head, that something that beautiful could be there, right? And I became enamored with them. And then I started as a student. I started looking at skulls and artwork, and I started to see all these skulls everywhere, right? All these printmakers were enamored with these things, and I became kind of curious about that. But I have a lot of skulls. I have a lot of pig skulls. I have a lot of a dog skull, which is pretty nice. We found in the chapel a lab. It's beautiful, beautiful skull. I like stuffed animals too. Stuffed taxidermed animals. I like that too. And I think I like those because of the frozen state that they're in. Sort of a specimen kind of thing. But I think again, the skulls really are really more about what lies beneath and the beauty of them. But connected, I mean, there's so many printmakers that I admire have them too. Albert Durer, Rembrandt, Tom Huck, Tony Fitzpatrick. They seem to be everywhere. And I love Mexican woodcuts. That's all there. I spent time in Brazil. There's a strong culture of the dead there too in the art. Kimberly Art, my major professor, very heavy into voodoo, Santeria. So I think those kinds of symbols have been around me a lot.